Hey, it's Jacquie. My podcast, The Natural Healing Reel, features guests from all over the world. They're sharing their stories of natural healing modalities. My intention on the show is to aid people with alternative ways in healing, physically, mentally, and emotionally. This podcast recognizes the essential role that mainstream medicine plays in our daily lives, and in no way should this be taken as medical advice. Please seek the advice of a competent medical professional for your care as you see fit, and most importantly, take care. Welcome to the Natural Healing Reel. I have a guest today that is right now living in Los Angeles, but has lived in many places around the world. And he is going to share his travels, his perceptions, his growth insights. He has written 5 novels, and we're going to speak and touch on some of them, especially his latest one, God Loves Ugly. That's a great title. Welcome to the Natural Healing Reel, Samuel Andrew.
How are you? Oh, thank you for having me. I'm doing really great today. It's the weather after Los Angeles has been raining. We had the most rain in 30 years this year. The most rain, and today we have sunshine. So I'm thrilled. I'm great. California is back.
Well, and it's usually burning, so I'm sure that rainfall is really welcomed, right?
It's really welcome. It's a blessing. I was privately paying for it. You know, the wells were empty, the reservoirs were low, we were in drought, especially in the rural areas. And I was praying for rain. And I believe the rain was just specially sent just for me. That's how self-centered I am.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Ask and it's given, they say, right?
Yeah, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained. And now we are out of drought in most of the state. They filled the reservoirs, and they weren't as responsible as they could have been. They could have filled even more reservoirs, in my opinion. But we have more rain than ever, and our reservoirs are full, and we're not talking about drought as much as they were talking about drought before. So I think we're in a better place.
That's great. That's good to hear. That's a blessing, because I'm not too far from you. Yeah. So let's talk about how do we want to start? Do we want to talk about sort of your journey through your process of awakening to where you are right now?
Sure. Well, I think
share it with us to start.
Yeah, you can just follow. We could just go here and there. But I think when we were born and the doctor slaps us in our little butt, we get the process of awakening from there. And whatever feedback we get from our responsible or irresponsible parents or whoever we're gifted to is the beginning of our awakening to what our assignment is in life. Sometimes it takes a little while for us to do something about it or to figure out what our tools are in this world. But I was on a process of awakening. I had 2 great parents who were in the 60s and trying to do best they could. They were Black, but they did not protest. They weren't those kind of people. And they just wanted to do well with us. And they taught us a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, a lot of consequences for actions, which was very good for me. And I only can speak for me. And so even though they weren't perfect and they had their own consequences for their own actions or blindness or the stages of their process or development, like any other human, they still planted some great things inside of me. There were occasionally some abusive people around me, and verbally abusive people, and there was also some emotional and some sexual abuse around me. So I had to really heal from that. But fast forward to being 18, I was sort of angry, aware, and responsible. Those were my three. I knew that I had consequences for my actions. I knew I could change things by my behavior and words and actions and deeds. I knew that I had something to do with my own success, like we all do. And I also had to take responsibility for the times I failed. But still, I had a part of me that had a victim mentality. And victim mentalities are almost, I hate to use the C word, are like a cancer. when you have a little growth or bacteria that begins to cancer, you can attack it with a nice set of homeopathic remedies, mushrooms, or something to maybe shrink the bacteria of cancer. You can address it head on, or you could just pop Cheetos and Frito-Lays and, cross your fingers and your body might not get what it needs. And that's what bitterness and unforgiveness and anger thriving is like. We all have a dose of it. We all have a measure of it. Some people long more than others. And we all have opportunities to address that. And like human beings are, we miss it sometimes, and sometimes we catch it.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to us being in our subconscious and not our conscious mind 95% of the time, they say, which is a lot, right? And so unless you're actually paying attention to what those thoughts are that are, well, they say generations old, some of them, right? Because we've learned it from watching our parents. And then that whole victim is, it's a tough one because it's a society thing that we've all got and all been taught, like you say. Yeah. And, how do you come to a spot where you're like, okay, I'm tired of being the victim, even though what you see, you are victimized, right? But to get out of it, you have to not see yourself as that, right?
Exactly. You're absolutely right. It's a process first of not seeing yourself as that. So I have this thing when I pass the mirror, and as I get older, I'm 57, and the mirror image changes every once in a while. I still smile and wink at myself. What you tell yourself is really important. And we have this time in this era right now where we're talking about branding victimization. Say that 30 times. It's hard to say. When branding being a victim, we have royalty doing it. People who were born out of royalty branding themselves as victims. And we have people who were born in poverty branding themselves as victims. And the onlookers saying, yeah, you are a victim. And because of that, society owes you, we owe you, or someone owes you to make it right. Well, the reality is maybe you might need a hand or a nice soft hand to hold to lift you up, but you're the only one that can make it right within your own process. So I had to start with, hey, my parents weren't perfect and they turned their back on some things and didn't notice when somebody was sexual toward me, or my parents were loving me with all they had, but there were certain things that they missed, or maybe it wasn't the best way my father could speak to me at some times, or maybe he could have used different words. That was then, this is now. What do I do with that residual pain? The only thing that I could learn and I could hear from people was forgiveness. And I thought forgiveness meant that I was letting the person off the hook. So I would say, if I forgive them, then they'll get away with it. Forgiveness is actually for you. It's for the person that went through it. So I had to learn to forgive people who were supposed to be my guardians, who loved me. And I had to learn to do it over and over and over again. Because I would have a great day of forgiveness on Tuesday, and on Thursday, I'd be pissed again. So I would have to learn to remind myself, you forgave. And then I had to look at my own relationships with people. Because when I was in my own pain, I hurt also others. Hurt people hurt people. Hurt is passed down, and what is not transformed is transferred. So
I like that.
Yeah, and I'm responsible for if I transfer it. I'm responsible. And that's the last thing I would want to do. And that's the last thing we would want to do, is keep transferring pain. So we identify the pain. This is it. It's ugly. It doesn't look good. It's not pretty. I'm carrying it around. Let's dissect it. Let's forgive what we can. My parents were 24 when they had me. 24.
Yeah, it's young. I had babies young too. And it's young. It's the kid raising the kid, really.
Yeah. Forgiveness really, repetitive forgiveness really matters. Intentional forgiveness really matters. That means every day. You are forgiving yourself, you're forgiving, and you are intentionally about loving people. And that attracts so much to you. You know, that's an honesty that says, hey, the people that I meet and see every day have their own level of process of pain and have things they never talk about, just like I do. I have to give them a long string and a long soft cushion. I can identify with people, and it has nothing to do with race. It's about spirit and experience. All Black people do not have a process, or excuse me, a brand on trauma. I was trying to talk to my friends in my neighborhood. I live in a gang-infested neighborhood, about Ukraine. They didn't want to talk about Ukraine at first until it took me about 7 times talking to different people. We do not have a brand on poverty. We do not have a brand on trauma, not just one race. Trauma is a spiritual thing. It's inherited from your last life.
Just ignorance. That's just an ignorance if that's the thought there.
But the relief is when you learn to share your pain with others who don't look like you or look like you and identify with them. You start to soften your own stance on unforgiveness, and that there's also a certain amount of evil in the world. And you can talk about it in a way where you don't want to participate and add to it. And you do that by bringing it to the light and talking about it. You don't do it by harping on it and settling down as if you're the only person who ever experienced it.
Well, and I think that that's interesting that you say that, because I think went through my life thinking that everybody is good, but that's not true, right?
Yeah.
There's not everybody's coming from the intention of the heart space, right? And I think that those are hard knocks when you have to learn that through that ignorance, right? Like, I think that that's an interesting thing that you said. There is evil in the world, unfortunately. And I think that what you said earlier is hurt people. And I know through my process, I have big time dad issues. And when he passed, somehow I found this memoir that he had, and he went back to his hometown, and I read it, and he was, I think, in his 50s, early 50s. And he went through this whole process and then as I'm reading it, I'm like, right? You know, he was, his dad died, then he was taken from his friends, put on a train, never talked about, he was now the man of the house, and like all of this stuff. And it's like, no wonder he was so cold and shut down. And, you know, his dad was his best friend. And then all of a sudden, you know, but based on the circumstances that you found out, he had in this small town, his dad, you know, ended up, there was the lady that he worked with ended up being pregnant, but she didn't have anybody. So my poor granny was living in this small town with everybody knowing that her husband knocked up anyway, it was like, I get why she, like, but it's interesting because, you know, when we can come to those people with a broader perspective of understanding, it's a lot easier to forgive, because
it is so much. And, you know, once you learn to understand your father better, it was easier for you to forgive him.
And heal, right? And understand that, you
understanding is what I was kind of looking for, and you hit it right on the nail. When you understand someone, you can forgive them, but you have to look. And you have to step out of the victim, like you're talking about, and be actually open to forgiveness. You wrote a book on this, Nobody's Victim. Nobody's Victim, yes. I wrote that years ago, and that was a book I wrote in anger. And I think it was okay because, well, anger is a real emotion. I don't agree with living in anger. It has to be some sort of passing emotion, and passing is up to you. It could be a passing of 7 years. Some people live their anger every day, 7 days, 7 months, or, you know, I'm using 7 because it's a great number, but I was angry for years and I didn't know it. I thought I was okay, but I realized I had all this stuff in me. And if I out of the 5 books that I've written, I think if I could regret one, that would be that book, because compared to my current book, God Loves Ugly, and all my books are available at samuelandrewsbooks.com. So you can that's just my way to, all my books are there. And I also promote my friends' books on that site too, samuelandrewsbooks.com. God Loves Ugly is a better book than Forgiving Nobody's Victims, because I'm in a better frame. The title, Forgiving Secrets and Things and Nobody's Victim, was aspirational. It wasn't exactly where I was. The anger, we see this in our society now. Everyone's angry.
They're in fear. They're in fear, right?
They're
The
angry.
fear, it started with the COVID, right? You were
Right.
talking about that you wrote a book through that as well. But isn't that funny that I just want to bring to your attention, you've got a judgment on one of your books there, mister. So let that go, because it serves a big purpose. Because when people are angry, they don't want to read fluff that, blah, 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 blah. They want to read where they're at so they can relate. And so I think that
it led me to today. And I think you're right. You hit it on the nose. You're not the first person to say it. And you're right. Whatever leads you to today is good. Yeah. Whatever leads you to today is great. But when people, I must caution this though, when people stay in a perpetual state of anger or fear, it is unhealthy to the body. It is the enemy of health because it conflicts with what we want to achieve, which is happiness, healthy bodies, and joy. And so we cannot live in a constant state of anger because it can kill you. It also has a negative effect on our relationships. We attract angry people as well, or people with similar issues. And we say first, oh, he or she has the same issue as me. Oh my God, we can connect on that issue. That's great for a while. But you cannot bond with anger successfully and expect a happy life.
Great point.
Great point. I learned that through the 7 years after writing Forgiving Secrets and Things, Nobody's Victim. I was very unhealthy. I was popping anxiety pills like Tic Tacs. I was in the bed, in the dark apartment, but then putting a shine on and going outside and meeting my friends and living and looking like I was okay, but I was struggling inside. Because all the holy books, including the Bible, they say, anger is fine. The Bible even says, be angry, but sin not. It says, things are going to happen to make you upset. Deal with it in a way that's responsible. Look at it and deal with it. So I don't go to bed angry anymore. I don't go to sleep angry at a person. If I had an interaction at a store or interaction with a friend that wasn't the best, I don't stew on it. I give it to God and I say, that person is where they're at today. I remember where I was yesterday. I can relate. Forgive me for the times I have made people angry when I was blind. And I forgive that person for being blind in that area. It doesn't mean the person that I'm upset with is useless. It just means in that particular area, they're blind and they offended me. I can forgive that.
Well, and is that also they're triggering something in us? If it's kind of poking something, it's also kind of a gift for us to be able to see that there's something still stuck in there.
Good
like
point.
You're saying, that energy can't stay in there because it develops cancerous. It's supposed to pass through us, all the energies, right?
Yeah.
Those ones that we clamp down on because we don't want to feel it, we end up getting stuck with it.
Right.
And we don't even know because it's so uncomfortable. We're so scared that we're like, it's so, and then we're attracting more of it without even realizing.
Right. You know, people don't recognize the signs in their body. And this is off the subject slightly, but we don't recognize when our body's telling us something. We're afraid of it. And we need to be at peace with that trigger from our body telling us that we have something going on. And if we do nothing but just breathe it out. If we do nothing but that as a start, when we ignore the triggers of our body, we get into a habit of doing that in other areas. So we ignore the triggers of our body because we're too angry, we're too mad, and we're not dealing with that. It's in our stomach or in our limbs. It goes into our fiber, goes into our muscles, our tendons. We walk different when we're angry. We breathe different when we're angry. And when we do this like 30 days, it can be a really bad effect on us. And if we ignore the triggers in our body, or when our body's telling something, we'll do it in other areas. We'll do it when our knee's hurting, and we'll push through. When your knee hurts, you should stop. When we have a pain in our side, we should recognize it and say, I have a pain in my side. What did I eat today? Off the subject, we should read labels. Words matter. Words matter, not just what we say to what our father says to us and what we say to our children, but words matter on our food packaging. Words, I'm going to my book, God Loves Ugly now, but our words matter. What we say, what we read, what we repeat matters. And so read the labels on your food. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
You don't want to take in a lot of negative things and then also ignore your body signals.
Because and a lot of people don't know this, but the universe doesn't know right or wrong, good or bad. It just knows what you're telling it. And so if whatever you're saying, right, or whatever you're watching, apparently you're going deep back into, it's like your body's reliving. If you're listening to somebody's horror story and you're like, your body's living it as though that's happening to you, apparently, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And we get what we're talking about. We attract where we're at, and we're broadcasting that energy, where we're at. Like if you're angry or you're in fear, it's a broadcast. It's going out there, whether you like it or not.
People see it and people feel it, like you just said. And people,
and then you're getting yucky stuff. And you don't know why, right?
Yeah. And most people live not knowing why, because they'll ask why. Oh,
that's it right there.
We ask why all the time, but we won't listen for the answer, especially when it's uncomfortable. And we ask why do things happen to me? Why do I always get in fights at the mall? Why do people talk to me that way?
Wrong questions. That's what I found out.
Yeah.
What did I do to deserve this? I must right. I used to always ask the wrong questions because I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know that actually asking it's given, right? So what am I asking?
Yeah. Not
the right things, right? It's and then listening. That's so huge. I love that you said that.
The answer will come if you ask enough. So,
and if you're not getting it, I heard that, and I've done it, and it does work to say, okay, show it to me louder. Speak to me louder because I'm not getting it yet. Right.
I did that last week.
It'll come through a song, or you'll hear a conversation where it'll be like, oh, that's it. There's my answer. And without a doubt.
That's it. We have a lot of help in this universe.
If you ask.
A lot of help.
If you ask.
If you ask.
They can't help you if you don't ask.
No, you and it's not here. Nothing's here to. There's an element of evil in this world. That's true, and darkness. But there are more for us than against us. We have more help than hinders. I said, hurt people, hurt others, hurt people, but healed people, healing people, heal people. If you're in the process of healing, if you're trying to heal, if you're asking, you attract other people who are asking. You can attract whatever you want in this world with a little bit of awareness and just of asking. So, we have all these opportunities around us to heal. We do not have to live in perpetual fear, which the media will tell us that. That's why I don't watch media every day.
You and I both. It's not healthy.
We are responsible for what we take in. That's why we read labels and we read the media. We look at the media and say, this is not good for me. I don't get to participate. I don't have to rush home and turn the news on. I don't have to choose a streaming choice of negativity. If I hear about a bickering fight, like there's a bickering fight in Tennessee now, I chose this morning not to go to that. I chose this morning not to listen to pundits on politics. I choose not to take in the negativity more.
You know what? It's horrific. Like every time you listen to anything that's happening out there, it's not a good thing. And it hasn't been for years now.
And it is scary if you're listening. So, I think that we have to know what's going on out there. But I think the only way to change the narrative is to not feed into it, right? To not look at it, to not give it your awareness and your attention, because once we do that, then it grows. Yes. Whatever we're looking at expands. So what you're saying is, I love that, like just watching your thoughts and creating a new narrative, because most of the subconscious thoughts of those 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day, I've been breaking them down for a while here. Holy cow. It's incredible what goes on, the chatter that goes on daily for all of us. It's not a positive thing usually. We're usually guilting ourselves, shaming ourselves, beating ourselves up. I should have done this. I should have, woulda, coulda, right? Like it's just on and on. And
why add to that? So with all the things going on in our head and dealing with the past and dealing with the present and healing, because I'm healing every day and I heal people every day. So I'm healing and I'm healing and I'm healing. So why would I go intentionally to the well of darkness and pull from that? When it has been identified to tear me down, to make me angrier, or to make me ill, or I even suspect that it might. Why would I go to that for help? The least I can do is block more intentional energy from streaming, from television, from my computer, from my devices, and also from people. Sometimes you meet your people in your neighborhood or in your life that are toxic. They're almost giving birth to healing. They're close. They need to push just a little bit more and the healing will begin. But the toxicity on them is thick. You're responsible for responding in kindness, but in walking away. You only can love and heal people to a certain degree without their participation. So you're responsible also for taking away some of the toxicity that comes your way from any different area.
Yep. One of my mentors, he's taught me to put a shield, like a vessel, right, to ground to the crystalline earth, right, and anchor down there so that I stay grounded, because I'm an air sign, so I'm usually way up over here. And and so that grounding in the morning, first thing, and setting that intention has been, really super powerful for me. It shifts my day, and if I forget to do that, I could look at my day and go, wow, it just kind of went here, there, right? You're like like the pink.
You're responsible. It's like driving a car without looking, or
it is.
Just you're looking down or something. The intentional plan of your day, setting your mind intentionally to what you want from your day, what you want from your life.
Where are you going?
Important.
Where are you going? You're out in your car now. Where are you going? You're just driving aimlessly. You're going to bump into some shit.
You're gonna. And also, even on the nicest days where you're really intentional and you really want to send a lot of love to the world and you really want to learn from your mistakes of, the last months, and you're working on certain issues in your life, even on that best intention, you're going to run into someone who may try to be adversary to that intention. Not because they're evil, just because where their process is and where they're at. You have to be so determined to be intentionally loving, intentionally forgiving, intentionally healing, intentionally reaching forward to what's ahead. That's really important, especially for us in our 50s, reaching forward to what's ahead instead of looking behind. And we have to be able to dismiss or communicate with that person in love, but with the intention on moving on. So you cannot ever say, well, I came out this morning with such a great mind. Look what happened. I met this blinking blunk. And then you're thinking, well, intentional thoughts don't work. You challenge that because you met someone who wasn't nice to you after you planned to be intentional. No. You will always meet toxic people occasionally. Heaven is heaven and earth is earth. When you're on earth, you're going to meet some toxic people. When you're in heaven and we leave this earth in bliss, we won't deal with that anymore. But our challenge is, while we're on earth, as a module in a video game and to go to different higher levels, you're going to have to jump over some toxic situations and people. Do it with love and do it with compassion for the person and also compassion for yourself.
And also have the awareness that it's contrast, right? And we live in a polarized universe. So without the rain, we wouldn't enjoy how great it is when the sun comes out.
Oh,
right?
my goodness.
We need to have that to grow. And so when we're getting, well, I was beating myself up like, oh, here I go again. I thought I dealt with this, that kind of stuff. And where really what I learned was how grateful I am, because the more contrast that you're getting, the further that you've got to bust through and the bigger your growth is. And it's actually a blessing because it helps you have to work through.
Yes, that's the gift. And people who do what we do, we get challenged by others like, who do they think they are? Who does they think they are? And in different phrases in the Bible and different holy books, it says higher level, higher devils, which means when a wide door is open for you, you are also walking through are many adversaries. The adversary is considered a negative word in some senses, but it's not. It just means a level of walking through your destiny, because we all have an assignment. And so when you meet someone on a higher level, for example, we had Kobe Bryant here who died a few years ago, who was on a higher level of thinking, but he received all sorts of attacks on his higher level. And so it happens also with me when I receive a new book or a new assignment or a message that I know for sure to pass on to my fellow humans who I have such love for as I love myself. And when I go out on that, of course I'm going to meet adversaries. Of course I'm going to meet someone who doesn't agree or someone who questions that. But know for sure who you are and rest in that. And when you rest in that, your assignment is sure. Adversaries become like a wind, a breeze, or a cotton ball on your shoulder you can brush off, and love on the way. Because if you don't brush off someone or fight toxicity in love, you haven't done it. That's the pain because sometimes we don't feel like it.
Well, and I think the big thing is that we just haven't been educated. We don't know. We're not aware of how this all works and how to help ourselves energetically, right? Like just that knowledge it's huge, just to know, okay, well, that's a thing. Okay, so what do I do when that's happening, right? Because the brighter your light shines, apparently, the dark side wants to take you out. They don't want you shining bright. And so, but when you're shining that bright, if you turn on the light in a dark room, the dark disappears.
Yeah, right.
So.
Yeah, and so even relatives, I had to have boundaries on. And
relatives for sure.
Yeah, I have, boundaries is something that we have a hard time talking about with those we love. We can have lovers or a partner or spouse that we're in love with. We have a good relationship, and then we still can have a corner of ourselves that we have that's just for us and our purpose, to make sure. It's always great when you meet someone that aligns with your purpose, and it's great for a while or maybe forever. But you still should keep a safe place, a check-in space of your own. And you know where that check-in space is that says, hello, me. How are you doing? How's your purpose? How's your agenda? How do you feel? These are things you do alone. We're not allowed to do this with someone else. And, sometimes we look for another person to complete us. The assignment is that we are already completed. And the battle has already been won. We are already victorious. And the adversaries or the doubt, which should never linger, as anger and fear should never linger. You walk through it, you walk past it, you step over it, because you're already victorious and secure about your destiny, which is 100%. I like to say 1,000% secure. So we need that time, and looking outside of ourselves can be very beautiful. Looking outside of ourselves can be very titillating and very enjoyable, but it's temporary as an eye blink. When your eyes closed, you're looking outside yourself with your eyes open, that can be great. But please sometimes close your eyes and go inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, that's another thing. I think that we just meditation has become, a popular thing, but a lot of people don't do it because, well, first of all, we're too busy. And second of all, it's just not something that's been ingrained in our culture. It is in different parts of the world, but here in North America, it's really a movement that people are trying to share, because if you don't close your eyes and take a breath, like what I do is that the brain heart coherence, right? Where you breathe into your heart and just open it up for 5 and then out for, they would say that you should roll out a little bit further than what you took in. Mm-hmm. But just by taking that breath and doing that 5-6 times, it brings your whole body into coherence.
Right.
And that's where miracles happen. That's where illness, just like pure health, comes in.
It could, yeah. So much happens when you learn to go inside yourself, and so much happens when you learn to breathe properly. First thing through a crisis, I had a wild week last week, but everything was coming at me. And thank God I have many friends, spiritual minded friends. My friends I don't have hardly any friends who are not spiritual minded. They know that our body is a shell, we're our spirit. I'm going to assign the skin color for this life, for the process I have to go through, but I have to learn what I have to go through. I accept it and I don't fight it. I do it in love. That's my intention. I had everything coming at me last week, and thank God a friend of mine said, breathe, reminded me to breathe. Sent me a message on IG, remind me to breathe. And that's the core of it. I've seen breathing help the most treacherous minds. I grew up with a very treacherous mind in my household growing up. And when he started to sit down and breathe, you saw changes in him. Slowly. Doesn't have it all together. No one does. Who does? But breathing helps. Athletes do it to find their center. Once you know yourself, people may call you arrogant because you're so secure. People confuse arrogance with self-awareness and self-knowledge and knowledge of self, knowledge of who they are. People confuse that with arrogance in you or me sometimes. It's not arrogance, it's knowledge of who we are and knowledge of yourself and expanding knowledge, the universe. And when we have that, some people who have not tapped into that may misread it. But it's the secret of everything, of being centered, of knowing who you are. When I breathe correctly, I attract everything that I need. When I walk around with my mouth open in shock as to what I see from the outside world, then I'm frozen in fear, frozen in anger, frozen in question mark, which I'd rather be frozen in question mark than any of those. But then I'm stagnant in life. And breathing is everything. And even if you start small, like I was such a fast-minded person as a child, I started learning to breathe in oddest places. Excuse me, I don't want to make your podcast a rated R, but I would learn to breathe on the toilet. Whenever I could whatever I could learn to breathe, I started learning to breathe on the toilet. And I would learn to breathe, take a breath, just learn to breathe anytime. And I would learn to breathe at a red light, a stop sign. Little small baby steps can grow and turn people like me, who grew up in a gang-infested neighborhood, into light. Yeah. So it's entitled, it's beyond race, it's beyond gender. And the Bible says God doesn't see man or woman. That's why I'm really surprised at some Christians sometimes that just harper on this stuff. God doesn't see man or woman.
I didn't grow up in religion. And I didn't grow up with any of that. I was very ignorant to it all and sort of just was, making my own way through. Yeah. And I was disappointed when I went to the churches, because I was thinking it was a safe space, but it actually wasn't that for us. I put my daughter in this private Christian school, and we went to the church. I did the Alpha, and I was open and really wanted to learn it all. Sure. But what was upsetting was how the churches, they're all fighting, they're all putting each other down. And then, I'm a hairstylist and I have gay friends, and they were born that way. And that's what they tell me. And I believe that.
Sure.
But they're looked down upon because no, right? We're all God's children. We're all one. We are all looking down each other's nose at each other. It was very disappointing to actually see the behavior and the people that lie, cheat, steal all week. And on Sunday, they're forgiven week after week after week. And, it really has, and I have friends that are the most amazing Christian Catholic people who live it and breathe it. And that's a gift, but it wasn't what I experienced as the whole. It was, what are your thoughts about that? Like the whole, the judgment of the Catholics to the Christians to all of these different religions, I was just shocked that they're all judging each other, putting each other down when they're in a place of God. Anyway, that was my guest today, Samuel Andrews. And I would love for you to look him up and go onto his website. I'm going to post it with this podcast and have a look at his journey and his travels and how he came from a place of anger and fear and being part of, a growing up space where it wasn't the most harmonious and healthiest places. And the tools and stuff that he has come into, light with to be able to heal, and now sharing his light and love and his tools that he has gained over these years. Anyways, thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you on the next Natural Healing Reel episode. Bye now.